When my boss's son replaced me with his college buddy after 8 years of loyalty, I thought my career was over, but I had access to financial records that would make their heads spin. What they didn't know was that I'd been sitting on evidence of a multi-million-dollar money laundering scheme, and I was about to turn their world upside down in ways they never saw coming. But would my revenge destroy the company and 43 innocent jobs? Or would I find a way to save everyone while getting the justice I deserved? The email notification popped up on my screen at exactly 9:47 a.m., but nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to read. After dedicating 8 years of my life to Monet Creative Solutions, working weekends, missing family dinners, and building this company's most profitable division from the ground up, I was being restructured. Out of my position as senior project manager, my hands shook as I scrolled through the corporate jargon. The promotion I'd been promised for 6 months was going to Derek Saison instead, Vincent Saison's 25-year-old son who had been at the company for exactly 42 days. Derek's college roommate Tyler was getting my team lead position, and together they were about to take over everything I'd spent nearly a decade creating. The conference room felt like a tomb when Vincent called me in 30 minutes later. His expensive suit probably cost more than my monthly salary, and his cold gray eyes showed absolutely no emotion as he delivered the news. Derek sat beside him in a chair that should have been mine, barely containing his excitement. Tyler lounged in the corner, scrolling through his phone like this was just another Tuesday. "This decision is final, Marcus," Vincent said, his voice carrying the tone of someone who'd never been told no in his entire life. "The company is moving in a new direction, and we need leadership that reflects our modern vision." "Sir, with respect, my division generated $4.7 million in revenue last quarter alone," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the fire burning in my chest. "The Henderson account, the Morrison project, the Delacroix merger, I've handled all of our biggest clients personally. My team trusts me, and our results speak for themselves." Derek leaned forward with a smirk that made my jaw clench. "That's right, Marcus. The old ways of doing business are dead. Tyler and I have fresh ideas that'll revolutionize this place. We learned about disruption and innovation in business school, stuff you probably never heard of." "Innovation?" I almost laughed. "You mean like the time you suggested we use TikTok dances in our presentation to the law firm? Or when Tyler recommended we replace our entire client database with a Google Doc?" Tyler finally looked up from his phone. "Those were brainstorming sessions, dude. You're supposed to think outside the box, not shut down creativity." Vincent raised his hand to silence the room. "Enough. Marcus, you've been a valuable employee, but your attitude toward change is exactly why we need new leadership. Derek and Tyler represent the future of this industry." "The future?" I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. "Vincent, these kids don't even know our clients' names. Derek couldn't tell you the difference between our quarterly projections and a grocery list. How exactly do you expect them to manage relationships I've spent years building?" "They'll learn," Vincent said dismissively. "Sometimes you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet." "And what about the 43 people who work under me? The people who depend on the stability I've created? What happens to them when your son realizes that real business isn't like the case studies he memorized in college?" Derek's face turned red. "I graduated magna cum laude from Wharton, old man. I think I can handle whatever you've been doing here." The insult hit me like a slap, but I kept my composure. 8 years of dealing with difficult clients had taught me how to control my emotions even when every fiber of my being wanted to explode. "Old man? I'm 34 years old, Derek. I was running million-dollar projects when you were still asking your dad for lunch money." "That's enough." Vincent slammed his hand on the table. "Marcus, you have 2 weeks to train Derek and Tyler on your responsibilities. After that, you'll be transitioning to a consultant role at 60% of your current salary. Take it or leave it." The room went silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. I looked around at these 3 people who had just destroyed my career with the casual indifference of someone changing television channels. Derek was already eyeing my corner office through the glass walls. Tyler had gone back to his phone. Vincent was checking his expensive watch like he had somewhere more important to be. "You know what, Vincent?" I said, gathering my papers with deliberate calm. "You're absolutely right about one thing. Change is coming to this company." I walked toward the door, feeling their eyes on my back. Derek called out, "Don't take it personally, Marcus. Business is business, right?" I paused at the doorway and turned back with the kind of smile that didn't reach my eyes. "You're going to learn that lesson sooner than you think. But here's something they probably didn't teach you at Wharton: when you make enemies of the people who actually know how things work, you better hope you're smart enough to figure it out on your own." Vincent's expression shifted slightly, like he was seeing something in my face that he hadn't expected. Are you threatening us, Marcus? Threatening? No, sir. I'm just stating a fact. You've built this company on relationships, trust, and expertise that took years to develop. You're about to hand it all over to two kids who think business is a video game. What could possibly go wrong? Derek laughed nervously. Dude, you're acting like we're going to burn the place down. We've got this handled. I'm sure you do, I replied, my voice honey-sweet with false sincerity. I'm sure you'll handle it exactly the way you've handled everything else in your privileged little life, with daddy's money and other people's hard work. The silence that followed was deafening. Tyler actually put his phone down. Vincent's face had gone pale, and Derek looked like he'd been slapped. I had crossed a line, and we all knew it. Clean out your office, Vincent said quietly. Security will escort you out in an hour. As I walked through the hallway toward my office, past the cubicles where my team was working, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not anger, not desperation, but a strange sense of clarity. These people had no idea what they'd just unleashed. They thought they were getting rid of a problem, but they'd actually created a much bigger one. What they didn't know, what none of them could have possibly known, was that I'd been part of this company's inner circle longer than any of them realized, and I'd seen things that would make their heads spin. 3 days after getting kicked out of my own office, I sat in the parking lot of Monet Creative Solutions at 6 in the morning, watching Derek's BMW pull into the spot that used to be mine. The irony wasn't lost on me. While he was sleeping in until noon and stumbling into work hungover, I was here documenting everything that was about to go wrong. My phone buzzed with a text from Maria Santos, our head of HR and the only person in management who'd had the courage to call me after my termination. Coffee shop across the street. 10 minutes. I have news you need to hear. The morning rush at Grind Coffee felt like chaos, but it was the perfect cover for what Maria had to tell me. She slid into the booth across from me, her usually perfect hair disheveled and her hands shaking as she pushed a manila folder toward me. Marcus, I could lose my job for this, but you need to see what I found, she whispered, glancing around nervously. After you left, I started going through the personnel files to process your termination paperwork. That's when I noticed some irregularities in the payroll system. I opened the folder and felt my blood pressure spike. Derek's salary was listed at $180,000 more than I'd been making after 8 years of promotions and proven results. Tyler's starting salary was $120,000, which was what I'd been earning 3 years ago. Look at the dates, Maria continued. Derek's been on payroll for 4 months, but he only started showing up to the office 6 weeks ago. Tyler's been getting paid for 2 months, but his first day was supposedly 3 weeks ago. Where was this money going? I flipped through the pages, my accounting background from college kicking in as I spotted pattern after pattern of financial irregularities. Maria, these aren't just payroll errors. Look at these consultant fees, $300,000 to something called Picasso Consulting Group last month alone. Have you ever heard of this company? Never. And get this, I tried to look them up in our vendor database, but there's no record of any contract or services rendered. The payments are being approved by Vincent personally, bypassing our normal approval process. My mind started racing as I connected dots that should have been obvious months ago. The overseas projects Vincent's been so secretive about, the client payments that never quite matched our invoices, the cash flow issues he mentioned in the quarterly meetings. Maria, I think there's something much bigger going on here. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. There's more. I accessed the bank records for our international accounts. I have access because of the HR compliance requirements. Marcus, there are wire transfers going out every week to shell companies in Panama, the Cayman Islands, and Switzerland. We're talking millions of dollars that have nothing to do with any legitimate business I can find. The coffee shop suddenly felt too hot, too crowded, too exposed. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying Vincent Cezanne has been using this company to launder money, and he just promoted his son to cover his tracks. Derek and Tyler aren't here because they're qualified, they're here because they're too stupid to ask the right questions. I stared at the documents, my 8 years at Monet Creative suddenly making sense in a completely different way. The late-night meetings Vincent had with clients I'd never met, the projects that seemed to generate enormous profits with no clear deliverables, the way he'd always been evasive about our international business, it had all been happening right under my nose. Maria, if this is true, then everyone who works at this company is at risk. If the feds catch wind of this, they'll shut us down and freeze everything. 43 innocent people will lose their jobs, their health insurance, their retirement savings, everything. I know, she said, tears forming in her eyes. That's why I'm telling you. You're the only person I trust who might know what to do about this. I closed the folder and leaned back, my mind working through possibilities and consequences. How much time do we have before this becomes impossible to hide? Derek's already screwing up the legitimate business so badly that clients are asking questions. The Henderson account called me directly yesterday asking why their project manager had been replaced with someone who didn't understand their requirements. The Morrison project is 3 weeks behind schedule because Tyler doesn't know how to read our project management software. Vincent's getting desperate, and desperate people make stupid mistakes. What kind of mistakes? Maria pulled out her phone and showed me a series of text messages. He's been texting me at all hours asking me to create fake employee records, to backdate contracts, to alter financial reports. He wants me to make it look like Derek and Tyler have been contributing to projects they've never even heard of. I felt a cold smile spread across my face as I realized the opportunity that was sitting right in front of me. Maria, Vincent just made the biggest mistake of his life. He didn't just fire me, he turned me into the one person who has nothing left to lose and everything to gain by exposing the truth. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that Derek and Tyler are about to learn that real business isn't a game, and Vincent's about to discover that you can't build a criminal empire on nepotism and incompetence. But more importantly, I'm thinking about those 43 employees who deserve better than losing their jobs because their boss is a criminal. Maria's eyes widened as she saw the determination in my face. Marcus, this is dangerous. If Vincent realizes what we know, he won't realize anything because he's too busy trying to cover up his son's failures, I interrupted. But here's what he doesn't understand. I've been documenting everything that happens in this company for 8 years. Every email, every client interaction, every financial discrepancy I've ever noticed. I have records he doesn't even know exist. What kind of records? I pulled out my personal laptop and opened a folder that contained hundreds of files. Remember when Vincent asked me to handle the international client communications? I kept copies of everything because I thought it might be useful for performance reviews. Turns out I've been accidentally building a paper trail of his money laundering operation for 2 years. Maria stared at the screen, her mouth open. Oh my God. Marcus, this is evidence of federal crimes. We could go to prison just for knowing about this and not reporting it. Or, I said, closing the laptop with a decisive snap, we could use it to save the company and everyone who works there. But first, we need to let Derek and Tyler destroy their credibility completely. Give them enough rope to hang themselves and then step in as the hero who saves the day. That's incredibly risky. What if they actually succeed somehow? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Maria, Derek couldn't successfully order lunch without help, and Tyler thinks Synergy is a type of energy drink. Trust me, they're going to fail spectacularly, and when they do, Vincent's going to be so desperate to save face that he'll be willing to make a deal with the devil himself. Maria gathered the papers, her hands still shaking but her voice growing stronger. So what's the plan? The plan is to give them exactly what they want, a chance to prove they can run this company better than I could. And when they crash and burn, which they will, I'm going to be there with a solution that saves everyone except the people who deserve to lose everything. I stood up and extended my hand to her. Are you with me, Maria? Because once we start this, there's no going back. We're either going to save this company or we're going to watch it burn down around Vincent's ears. She shook my hand firmly. Those 43 people trusted you to protect them, Marcus. Now it's time to prove that their trust wasn't misplaced. As we walked out of the coffee shop together, I felt something I hadn't experienced in days: hope. Vincent thought he'd gotten rid of his biggest problem, but he'd actually created his worst nightmare. The question wasn't whether Derek and Tyler would fail, it was how spectacular their failure would be and whether I could use the chaos to expose the truth before innocent people got hurt. The sound of Derek screaming into his phone could be heard through the glass walls of what used to be my office, and I had to admit, watching him fall apart was more satisfying than I'd expected. 2 weeks had passed since my termination, and the chaos unfolding at Monet Creative Solutions was beyond anything I could have imagined in my wildest dreams. My phone buzzed with another panicked text from Maria. Henderson account just threatened to pull their contract. Derek told them we could deliver their campaign in half the time for twice the results. They want specifics he can't provide. I smiled as I typed back from my car in the parking lot across the street, where I'd been documenting every disaster as it happened. The Henderson account wasn't just any client, they were our biggest revenue source, a law firm that required absolute precision and confidentiality in everything we did. I'd spent 3 years building that relationship, learning their partners' preferences, understanding their corporate culture, and delivering results that exceeded their expectations every single quarter. Derek had just promised them the impossible while having no clue what they actually needed. Through my binoculars, I watched Tyler frantically searching through filing cabinets, clearly looking for documents he didn't understand. The Morrison project timeline was spread across 3 whiteboards, but the connections between tasks made no sense. Colors were everywhere, sticky notes covered every surface, and it looked like a kindergarten art project rather than a professional business plan. My phone rang. It was Janet Morrison herself, the CEO of Morrison Industries and one of my closest professional relationships. "Marcus, I hope you don't mind me calling directly, but I'm concerned about some changes at your company." The young man assigned to our project seems enthusiastic, but he's asking questions that suggest he doesn't understand what we're trying to accomplish. "What kind of questions, Janet?" I asked, though I already knew this conversation was going exactly where I'd hoped it would go. "Well, yesterday he asked if we could change our product launch from medical devices to social media marketing because he had some great ideas about viral content. When I explained that we manufacture heart monitors, he suggested we make them into fitness trackers for teenagers." "Marcus, I'm starting to worry about whether Monet Creative understands our business at all." I let the silence hang for a moment before responding. "Janet, I'm no longer with the company in my previous capacity, but I understand your concerns. Have you spoken with Vincent Cezanne about this? I've been trying to reach him for 3 days, but his assistant keeps telling me he's in meetings. The project deadline is in 6 weeks, and we've made 0 progress since you left. I hate to be blunt, but if this continues, we might need to consider other options." After ending the call, I walked into the lobby of Monet Creative Solutions like I belonged there. The receptionist, Sarah, looked surprised but pleased to see me. "Marcus, what are you doing here? I thought you were just checking on some things," I said with a friendly smile. "Is Vincent available? I think there might be some confusion about the Morrison project that I could help clear up." Sarah glanced around nervously. "He's been in his office all morning with Derek and Tyler. There's been a lot of shouting. Should I tell him you're here? Actually, let me surprise him. We're old friends after all." The executive floor felt different now, tense, desperate, like a ship taking on water. I could hear Vincent's voice echoing from his office before I even reached the door. "How do you lose a client presentation? It's not a set of car keys, Derek. It's 40 slides that represent 6 months of work." "Dad, calm down." Derek's voice was strained, defensive. "Tyler and I thought the old presentation was boring, so we created a new one with better graphics and more engaging content. It's basically the same information, just presented in a more modern way." "More modern?" Vincent's voice cracked with disbelief. "You turned a medical device marketing strategy into a TikTok dance tutorial. The Morrison account is worth $2.4 million and you've reduced it to a joke." I knocked on the door frame and stepped into the office. "Vincent, I heard there might be some challenges with the Morrison project. Maybe I could help." The room went silent. Vincent looked like he'd aged 10 years in 2 weeks. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled, and his eyes had the wild look of a man watching his empire crumble. Derek was slumped in his chair, looking defeated and confused. Tyler was staring at his phone, probably trying to pretend he wasn't part of this disaster. "Marcus," Vincent said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What are you doing here?" "Janet Morrison called me directly. She's concerned about the project timeline and asked if I could provide some guidance." "As a consultant, of course, since that's my new role according to our agreement." Derek straightened up, some of his old arrogance returning. "We don't need your help, old man. Tyler and I have this under control. Just because we're doing things differently doesn't mean we're doing them wrong." "Really?" I pulled out my phone and played a recording I'd made of my conversation with Janet Morrison an hour earlier. Her voice filled the room, professional but clearly frustrated. "The young man assigned to our project seems enthusiastic, but he's asking questions that suggest he doesn't understand what we're trying to accomplish." Tyler finally looked up from his phone. "Dude, you can't just record people without their permission. That's probably illegal or something." "Actually, it's perfectly legal in this state as long as one party consents to the recording," I replied calmly. I learned that during my business law courses, the ones I took while building this company's most profitable division. Vincent's hands were shaking as he reached for his coffee cup. "What do you want, Marcus? If you're here to gloat, I'm here because 43 people are about to lose their jobs, and unlike some people in this room, I actually care about their families and their futures." I set a folder on Vincent's desk, not the one with the money laundering evidence, but something equally damaging. "These are the client complaints that have come in since my departure. Henderson, Morrison, the Delacroix merger partners, even smaller accounts that should have been impossible to screw up." Derek grabbed the folder and started reading, his face growing paler with each page. This can't all be accurate. We've been working really hard, and most of these complaints are probably just misunderstandings. Misunderstandings? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Derek, you told the Henderson law firm that their logo looked too serious and suggested they replace their scales of justice with a smiley face emoji. You asked the Morrison medical device team if they'd considered making their heart monitors into gaming controllers. These aren't misunderstandings, they're disasters. Vincent stood up abruptly, his chair rolling backward into the wall. Enough. Derek, Tyler, get out. I need to speak with Marcus privately. But Dad, Derek started to protest. Get out. Vincent roared, his composure finally cracking completely. Go find something useful to do if that's even possible. After they left, Vincent collapsed back into his chair and buried his face in his hands. This is a nightmare, Marcus. Everything I've built is falling apart and I don't know how to stop it. You know exactly how to stop it, I said, my voice steady and calm. The question is whether your pride will let you do what needs to be done. He looked up at me with desperate eyes. What are you proposing? I'm proposing that you admit you made a mistake. You give me back my position, we fix the client relationships before they're permanently damaged, and we restructure Derek and Tyler into roles where they can actually learn something without destroying the company. And what do you get out of this? Besides your job back, I mean. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to barely above a whisper. I get the satisfaction of saving this company from the people who were supposed to protect it. But more importantly, Vincent, I get to keep evidence of certain financial irregularities from becoming public knowledge. His face went white. What are you talking about? I'm talking about offshore accounts, shell companies, and wire transfers that don't match any legitimate business activity I can identify. I'm talking about the kind of patterns that make federal investigators very interested in taking a closer look at your operations. Vincent's hands started trembling again. You don't understand the pressure I've been under. The company was hemorrhaging money and I had to find creative solutions to keep us afloat. Everything I did was to protect the employees, to keep this place running. By laundering money through Picasso Consulting Group? By paying your son and his friends salaries for work they never did? Vincent, you didn't save this company, you turned it into a criminal enterprise. How long have you known? He asked, his voice barely audible. Long enough to document everything. But here's what you need to understand, I don't want to destroy you, Vincent. I want to save the company and everyone who works here. But that means you need to start making better decisions, starting right now. Vincent was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the city skyline. What do you want me to do? I want you to call an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. I want you to tell them that the recent management changes haven't worked out as planned and that you're promoting me to Chief Operations Officer to stabilize the situation. Derek and Tyler get demoted to junior analyst positions where they can actually learn the business from the ground up. And the other matter? The financial irregularities you mentioned. I stood up and walked toward the door. That depends entirely on how well you cooperate with cleaning up this mess. Help me save the company and maybe we can find a way to quietly unwind the problematic operations without destroying everyone's lives. But if you fight me on this, Vincent, I promise you that the evidence I have will find its way to the appropriate authorities. As I reached the door, I turned back one final time. Oh, and Vincent? Derek and Tyler are about to learn that real business isn't a game where you can restart when things go wrong. Some mistakes have permanent consequences. Walking into the emergency board meeting at 8 a.m. sharp felt like stepping into a battlefield where I held all the weapons, but Vincent still didn't realize he'd already lost the war. The mahogany conference table was surrounded by 7 of the most powerful business leaders in the city, and every single one of them looked like they'd rather be anywhere else on a Thursday morning. Board Chairman Margaret Picasso didn't waste time with pleasantries. Vincent, your email last night was concerning, to say the least. You're telling us that the management restructuring you implemented 3 weeks ago has failed completely. Vincent looked like he'd spent the night staring at the ceiling, his usually perfect appearance replaced by wrinkled clothes and bloodshot eyes. The transition has been more challenging than anticipated. Our client retention has dropped by 30% and we're facing potential contract cancellations worth over $8 million. In 3 weeks, board member Robert Dolly leaned forward, his voice sharp with disbelief. Vincent, when you promoted your son and his friend, you assured us they were qualified to handle increased responsibilities. What changed? Derek and Tyler sat at the far end of the table looking like students called to the principal's office. Derek kept glancing at his father for support, while Tyler seemed more interested in the view from the 42nd floor windows than the conversation that was deciding his future. The learning curve has been steeper than expected, Vincent said weakly. However, I believe I have a solution that will address our immediate concerns while providing long-term stability. Margaret's eyebrows rose. And what solution would that be? Vincent turned to look at me, and I could see the moment he made his choice between his son's pride and his company's survival. I'm recommending that we promote Marcus Rivera to Chief Operations Officer, effective immediately. His experience with our major accounts and his understanding of our operational systems make him the logical choice to stabilize our current situation. The room went silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. Derek's face turned red, then white, then red again as he processed what his father had just said. Dad, you can't be serious. We talked about this. Marcus is stuck in the past. We need forward-thinking leadership, not someone who's afraid of innovation. Innovation? Margaret's voice could have cut glass. Derek, I've reviewed the client feedback from the past 3 weeks. You suggested that Henderson Law Firm rebrand themselves as the Happy Lawyers and replace their website with memes. How exactly is that innovative rather than simply incompetent? Tyler finally spoke up, his voice defensive and whiny. We were trying to make their brand more relatable to younger demographics. Not everything has to be boring and traditional. Henderson Law Firm's youngest partner is 47 years old and they specialize in corporate mergers and acquisitions, I said calmly. Their clients are Fortune 500 companies, not college students. Understanding your audience isn't traditional, it's basic business sense. Robert Dolly pulled out a tablet and started reading from it. According to the reports I've received, the Morrison Medical Device project is 6 weeks behind schedule because you replaced their product launch strategy with a social media campaign for teenagers. Tyler, can you explain the logic behind marketing heart monitors to people who don't have heart conditions? Tyler shifted uncomfortably in his chair. We thought we could expand their market by positioning the devices as fitness trackers. It's called thinking outside the box. It's called not understanding the product, Margaret replied sharply. Medical devices require FDA approval, clinical testing, and regulatory compliance. You can't just rebrand a heart monitor as a fitness tracker because you think it sounds cooler. Vincent cleared his throat, clearly desperate to move the conversation forward. Which is why I believe Marcus is the right person to repair these relationships and restore confidence in our operations. Board member Sarah Monet, who'd been quietly taking notes, looked up at me. Marcus, assuming the board approves this promotion, what's your plan for addressing these issues? I stood up and activated the presentation screen, revealing a detailed recovery plan I'd been preparing for exactly this moment. First, I'll personally call each affected client to acknowledge our mistakes and present revised project timelines that are realistic and achievable. Second, I'll reassign Derek and Tyler to junior analyst positions where they can learn our processes before taking on client-facing responsibilities. Hey! Derek jumped to his feet. I'm not taking a demotion. I have an MBA from Wharton and I'm not going to be supervised by someone who doesn't even have a master's degree. Your MBA is impressive, Derek, I replied evenly, but it doesn't replace the experience of actually managing client relationships and delivering results. Would you rather learn those skills in a junior position, or would you prefer to explain to our shareholders why we lost $12 million in contracts because you were too proud to admit you needed training? Margaret nodded approvingly. Marcus, what's your timeline for stabilizing these client relationships? Henderson can be salvaged within 2 weeks if I personally handle their concerns and present a revised strategy that addresses their actual needs. Morrison will require more work. We'll need to scrap the current approach entirely and start over, but their product launch isn't until December, so we have time. The smaller accounts can be recovered quickly once we demonstrate that we're taking their concerns seriously. Vincent was sweating despite the air conditioning. Marcus, what about the broader operational issues? Are there other areas where we need to make changes? This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the opening to address the elephant in the room without directly accusing Vincent of criminal activity in front of the board. There are some financial irregularities in our international operations that need to be reviewed and corrected. Nothing that threatens the company's stability, but we should clean up our reporting procedures to ensure full compliance with federal regulations. I watched Vincent's face carefully as I spoke and saw the exact moment he realized I was offering him a way out. His shoulders relaxed slightly and he nodded. Yes, we should definitely address any compliance issues proactively. Margaret made a note on her tablet. What kind of irregularities are we talking about? Primarily documentation issues with some of our overseas consulting contracts, I said smoothly. The work was legitimate, but the paperwork doesn't meet current regulatory standards. It's the kind of thing that could raise questions during an audit, so we should fix it before it becomes a problem. Derek was still standing, his face flushed with anger and humiliation. This is ridiculous. You're all acting like Tyler and I are incompetent, but we just have different approaches. Maybe the problem isn't us, maybe it's that this company is stuck in the past and afraid to embrace change. Robert Dolly's voice was ice cold. Derek, in 3 weeks, you've managed to alienate our 3 largest clients, put a $12 million project at risk, and suggest business strategies that demonstrate a fundamental misunderstanding of what this company does. That's not innovative, that's catastrophic. But Derek started to protest. But nothing, Margaret cut him off. This board has a responsibility to our shareholders, our employees, and our clients. We cannot allow personal relationships to compromise the company's stability. Vincent, I'm calling for a formal vote on Marcus's promotion to Chief Operations Officer. All in favor? 6 hands went up immediately. Vincent hesitated for a moment, looking at his son's devastated face, then slowly raised his hand as well. Motion carried unanimously, Margaret announced. Marcus, congratulations. You'll have full authority to restructure operations as needed to stabilize our client relationships. Derek slammed his hand on the table. This is unbelievable. Dad, you're really going to let them humiliate me like this? I'm your son. Vincent's voice was barely above a whisper. Derek, this isn't about humiliation. It's about saving the company. Fine, Derek shouted. But don't expect me to work under him. I'm not going to be some entry-level employee supervised by someone who's jealous of my education and my position. That's your choice, I said calmly. But if you leave now, you'll be walking away from the best opportunity you'll ever have to actually learn how to run a business. Your father built something remarkable here, Derek. You can either help preserve it or you can let your pride destroy it. Tyler finally spoke up, his voice small and uncertain. What if we stayed and actually tried to learn? I mean, maybe we did mess some things up. Derek stared at his friend in disbelief. Are you seriously going to side with them against me? I'm not siding with anyone, Tyler replied. I'm just saying maybe we bit off more than we could chew. Maybe we should learn from someone who actually knows what they're doing. The room fell silent as Derek looked around the table, seeing no support anywhere. His father avoided eye contact, the board members looked impatient, and even his best friend was abandoning him. Fine, Derek said finally, his voice bitter with defeat. But this isn't over. You think you've won something here, Marcus, but you have no idea what you're getting yourself into. As Derek stormed out of the conference room, I felt a moment of genuine sympathy for him. He was about to learn some very hard lessons about consequences, responsibility, and the difference between privilege and competence. But more importantly, Vincent was about to discover that making a deal with someone who knew all his secrets was far more dangerous than he'd realized. 6 months later, I sat in Vincent's old office, now mine, staring at the nameplate that read Marcus Rivera, Chief Executive Officer, and thinking about how dramatically everything had changed since that devastating morning when I thought my career was over. The irony wasn't lost on me that the man who tried to destroy my future had actually handed me the keys to his entire empire. The transition hadn't been smooth, but it had been necessary. Vincent had stepped down as CEO 3 months earlier, officially citing health concerns but privately accepting that his criminal activities had made his position untenable. The board had unanimously voted to promote me after I'd successfully recovered every client relationship Derek had damaged and increased our quarterly revenue by 18%. Derek knocked on my door, his attitude completely transformed from the arrogant young man who'd once called me an old man, unfit for modern business. Marcus, do you have a few minutes? I wanted to talk to you about the Henderson presentation next week. Of course, come in, I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. How's the preparation going? Over the past 6 months, Derek had undergone what could only be described as a complete personality transformation. Working as a junior analyst under my direct supervision had taught him humility, work ethic, and actual business skills. He'd started staying late to understand client needs, asking thoughtful questions instead of making assumptions, and treating every project like an opportunity to prove himself rather than something he was entitled to. I finished the market research you requested, and I think I understand why my original approach was so wrong, Derek said, placing a thick folder on my desk. Henderson Law Firm isn't just another client, they're a partnership of professionals who've built their reputation on precision and reliability. My suggestion to make them more fun wasn't innovative, it was insulting to everything they've worked to achieve. I flipped through his research, impressed despite myself by the thoroughness and insight he'd developed. This is excellent work, Derek. You've clearly learned to think about business from the client's perspective rather than your own. I had a good teacher, he said, and for the first time since I'd known him, there was no sarcasm or resentment in his voice. Marcus, I owe you an apology that's about 6 months overdue. When my father promoted me over you, I thought I deserved it because of my education and my last name. I didn't understand that business isn't about what you think you know, it's about what you can actually deliver. The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. Derek, we all make mistakes. What matters is learning from them. But here's what I don't understand, Derek continued, his expression growing more serious. Why did you fight so hard to save this company instead of just exposing my father's crimes and walking away? You could have destroyed him, taken everything he'd built, and started your own firm with his former clients. Instead, you protected 43 jobs and gave me a chance I didn't deserve. This was the conversation I'd been both expecting and dreading for months. Derek had grown smart enough to start asking the right questions, and he deserved honest answers. Because destroying your father wouldn't have helped anyone except my own wounded pride. The people who worked here, Maria, Sarah, the entire creative team, they didn't deserve to lose their jobs because Vincent made terrible decisions. But there's more to it than that, isn't there? Derek pressed. I've been going through the old financial records as part of my analyst training, and I've noticed some irregularities that don't make sense. Payments to consulting companies that don't seem to exist, wire transfers to offshore accounts that don't match any projects I can find. Marcus, was my father involved in something illegal? I leaned back in my chair, studying Derek's face carefully. He'd matured enough to handle the truth, but revealing Vincent's crimes would shatter what was left of his relationship with his father. Derek, some questions are better left unasked. Your father made mistakes, but he's paying for them in his own way. That's not an answer, Derek said firmly. I'm not the same person who walked into this office 6 months ago thinking I knew everything. I've learned to face uncomfortable truths, and I need to know what really happened here. Before I could respond, Maria knocked on my door and entered with an expression that immediately set off alarm bells in my head. Marcus, we need to talk. Now. Derek, I'm sorry, but this is confidential. Derek stood up, gathering his papers. We'll continue this conversation later, Marcus. I'm not going anywhere, and I'm not going to pretend I don't see what's right in front of me. After Derek left, Maria closed the door and activated the white noise machine we'd installed for sensitive conversations. We have a problem. A federal investigator called this morning asking questions about Picasso Consulting Group and the offshore payments. Someone tipped them off. My blood ran cold. Who would have access to that information? That's what worries me, Maria said, pulling out her phone. I got a call from Vincent an hour ago. He's desperate, Marcus. He thinks Derek might have discovered something and reported him to the authorities. He wants to meet with you tonight, alone. Where? The old warehouse district near the pier. He said he has something that belongs to you and that if you don't come, everyone you care about will suffer the consequences. I felt a chill run down my spine. Maria, Vincent's not the same man who used to run this company. Desperation makes people do things they never thought they were capable of. He's lost everything, his position, his reputation, his son's respect. A man with nothing left to lose is extremely dangerous. You can't go alone, Maria said urgently. If Vincent's really unraveling, there's no telling what he might do. He still has connections to some very dangerous people through his money laundering operations. I thought about Derek's questions, about the federal investigation, about the 43 employees who still depended on me to keep this company stable. I have to go, Maria. If Vincent's planning something desperate, I need to stop it before innocent people get hurt. Then we call the police. And tell them what? That I've been covering up evidence of federal crimes for 6 months? That I've been blackmailing Vincent to save the company? I shook my head. This is my mess to clean up. Maria grabbed my arm. Marcus, this isn't your fault. You saved this company and everyone who works here. You gave Derek a chance to become a better person. You've done everything right. Have I? I asked, staring out the window at the city skyline. Or have I just been playing a game where everyone loses in the end? Vincent's about to be arrested, Derek's going to discover that his father is a criminal, and 43 people are going to lose their jobs when the feds shut us down for being part of a money laundering operation. You don't know that will happen, don't I? I turned to face her. Maria, I've been so focused on saving this company that I forgot something important. You can't build a future on someone else's crimes. Vincent's illegal activities are going to catch up with all of us eventually. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number, the pier. Midnight. Come alone, or Derek learns about his father's business partners the hard way. Maria read the message over my shoulder. He's threatening Derek now. Marcus, you have to call the police. If I call the police, Vincent goes to prison, the company gets shut down, and Derek spends the rest of his life knowing his father was a criminal. If I don't call them, Vincent might do something desperate that puts everyone at risk. I grabbed my jacket from the back of my chair. There has to be a third option. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that Vincent's not the only one who's been playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers, I said, pulling out a small recording device. He taught me something important about this business. Sometimes you have to make deals with people you don't trust. But he also taught me something else: always have an insurance policy. Maria's eyes widened as she realized what I was planning. You're going to record your conversation with him. I'm going to give Vincent one last chance to do the right thing. And if he chooses wrong, I'm going to make sure there's evidence of exactly what kind of man he really is. I paused at the door. Maria, if something happens to me tonight, give Derek the envelope in my desk drawer. It contains everything he needs to know about his father, and more importantly, everything he needs to save this company legally. Marcus, this is insane. You're walking into a trap. Maybe I admitted. But sometimes the only way to win a game is to change the rules entirely. Vincent thinks he's cornered me, but he's about to learn that the student has become better than the teacher. As I walked toward the elevator, I thought about Derek's question earlier. Why had I fought so hard to save this company instead of just destroying Vincent and walking away? The answer was simple, but it had taken me 6 months to fully understand it myself. I'd fought to save Monet Creative Solutions because somewhere along the way it had stopped being Vincent's company and started being mine. The 43 people who worked here, the clients who trusted us, the reputation we built, none of that belonged to Vincent anymore. It belonged to everyone who'd earned it through honest work and genuine relationships. Tonight, Vincent was going to learn that when you try to destroy someone's life, you better make sure they don't have the skills, the knowledge, and the determination to build something better from the ashes. The elevator doors closed, and I headed toward what might be the most important conversation of my life, one that would determine whether justice finally prevailed or whether Vincent's crimes would destroy everyone I'd worked so hard to protect.